The next chakra is at the level of the throat, and this is called Vishuddha, which means purified. What we're trying to do now is get clear of these contaminating and interfering blockages, all these objects, and come to that sound Om in its purity, with not hearing it through things, but hearing it direct. And with that coming to the innate light in its totality, not as reflected or as radiating from things, but in itself. Now there are many, many yogas that go to work on this. This is the level of the monk. This is the level of the monastic or meditative disciplines. To close these eyes, to wipe out that world, to open this middle eye and get the inner world going. Move in on this, not just experience it in reflex. Well, one of the yogas is called the yoga of fire, or Dumo. Dumo is a Tibetan word that means a furious, fierce woman who kills your desires. What this yoga requires is the activation of the fire of the navel chakra. Cultivating violence. Here's what we're going to be doing. We're going to be taking the powers of the lower chakras and unshelling the energy that's within them. The lower chakras are simply lower manifestations or lower inflections of the same powers that are up here. This is the power of the third chakra, the Manipura chakra, being turned now against itself, being activated. The fire, it's pictured, one is to picture this, the fire of the navel sphere burning up through the whole body up to this middle eye where we're coming in a minute, and releasing from that a sort of sap that drops down in these all kinds of wildest images. The second meditation is that of what is called the illusion body yoga. Look at yourself in a mirror. You look just as good there as you do here. Some mirrors are made so you look better. It's all very convincing, but it's not there. Well, you're convincing too, but you're not there either. You are simply a reflex. Or, here's a wonderful meditation. Go someplace where there's a good echo and you're quite alone. And shout some of the worst things at yourself. Call yourself everything terrible. And you'll respond as it comes back. You'll think, he's saying things like that about me. And just then you will realize that all talk is just echo like that and no more important than that. And this way of regarding the whole world, both in its image and in its verbal aspect, as illusion and to be thrown away. Then there's another meditation on dreams. Now we're getting to our Freud and Jung area. Watch your dreams, watch your dreams, watch them. In fact, cultivate them. And then, next stage, change them. Even while they're there and you are completely involved in them, learn how to manipulate them and make them do what you want them to. And then finally, go past the dreams just to the light of the dreams. This is called the light yoga. And when you go to sleep, you're still in yoga. Okay, now we're asleep, awake. When that happens, there are two stages to the illumination. The next stage is here between the eyes, above the eyes. This is called Ajna, A-J-N-A, A-J-N-A. This is the center of authority or power. That's the meaning of that word. Look at your images of the pharaohs. The Uraeus serpent comes right out there. That is the highest sphere of authority in the world. And when your serpent is there, you have reached the point of beholding the image of God. God being the incorporating image of the world. You are also hearing the sound of God, which is Om. That lotus has only 2 petals. There are 2 entities there, the creature and the creator, the beholder and the beheld. And here, the power of the second chakra, the erotic chakra, is realized. The beloved, the true beloved is God, and the soul beholds it. Now, Ramakrishna, speaking of this stage, says that it is as though there were a window between the beholder, the soul, and God who is beheld. But the aim of love is not relationship, it is identity. This is the realm now where we are of heaven. This is Dante's Rose of Paradise, where the soul beholds the beloved, which is God. Next stage, we withdraw that barrier, and both are gone. There is no subject, there is no object. We have gone past all pairs of opposites. All pairs of opposites. Now comes a very mysterious problem. What happened between here and here? This is called Sahasrara, the 1,000-petaled lotus. This mystery of what happens between here and here is the mystery known as Maya, M-A-Y-A, 2 long A's. Ma is a Sanskrit root meaning to create an illusion, to bring forth, to measure forth. A magician creates an illusion. Below this, everything is 2, from God down to a blade of grass. Above that, there's nobody there. And what about that? Well, I once saw a kitten come into a room where there was a mirror without a frame standing against the wall. And the kitten saw itself in the mirror. And of course, it took the aggressive attitude. Its little hump went up and its hair stood out, and it stalked this thing, which of course replied. And in doing so, it walked off the edge of the mirror, and there was no kitten there. Then it went behind the mirror. I thought, well, that's perfect. That is exactly an image of Maya, as the Indians describe it. When you're beyond it, it's not there. When you're this side of it, it bounds everything. You can't talk about it. Maya is regarded as the mother of the world. It is the female principle, the womb of the world, time and space itself, and all forms, all thinking is within this realm. All Indian philosophy, sociology, and everything else intends that transcendent experience. And here comes this realization. This world is nirvana. The word nirvana means where wind does not blow, the quiet pool. When the wind does blow, it's the same pool. This is it. The ultimate word in these mythologies is, this is the golden lotus world. We're in it right now. And so now I want to come to the last phase of this story. In Tibet, there is developed, right up to the time the communists came in, the prime culminating flower of Buddhist thinking as it developed in India before the Muslims came in. The Tantric Buddhism of India. And the great text, and I think many here have seen it and read it, has been translated by Evans Wentz, the Tibetan Book of the Dead. This tells of the 49 days, this is all mythological now, the 49 days that elapse between the moment of death and the moment of rebirth. At the very moment of death, everyone will have the experience, according to this view. One beholds the innate light. Right? The culminating experience of yoga is to be had by everyone. But it is such a fierce and horrific light that one is afraid to hold to it, and one's eyes slip to the side to a lesser light. This is the second light. If one can hold to it, one is out. One is through. One has achieved the fruit of lifetimes. If one can't, one has started down. So I've taken us up. Now we're going to take the reverse course down. As we move down, we move from the pure light, the mother light, to what is called the sunlight, S-O-N, sun, the child of the mother. The light that brings forth forms. This takes itself the form of a Buddha, the so-called Vairocana Buddha, the Buddha who brings forth forms. This is something to see. You can't hold to that either. So you're slipping, you see. We've got down here already now. And now we come down still further by slow degrees. For the next 7 days, there are going to be apparitions of Buddhas in peaceful postures. First, this central Buddha, then the Buddha of the East, then of the South, then of the West, then of the North. Each of them a reduction. These are called the peaceful deities, and they belong to this sphere between the eyes, the sixth chakra. Then, all five will appear at once. And then, all five with their Shaktis, with their female counterparts, dancing. That must be the liveliest chakra of all. And we are now about to move down to this chakra, the chakra of cutting away the world. And now come what are called the terrific or the terrible deities. And these are frightening. This is the frightening aspect of the world in being. The peaceful, we couldn't bear it. Now comes the frightening. And these same Buddhas, you see these on these Tibetan tankas, these same Buddhas appear in horrendous aspects with three fierce heads, like Dante's Satan, with their consorts embracing them. And in the hands of the consorts, skulls of blood held to the mouth of the bodhisattvas. And the bodhisattvas holding in their hands horrendous weapons and skulls and weapons of terror. Again the five more days. And then the five together in great commotion, accompanied by ghouls, people carrying corpses for weapons, people eating the dead and the entrails of the dead, people with animal heads, these horrific aspects of our dreams as we come down. First the peaceful, then the horrific. Now these are not invented images. These are not made-up images. These actually you find in your own dreams. These are simply what might be called the classical archetypes of figures that do appear in dreams. You don't have to believe in these. They'll come and show themselves to you. Now we come down still further to the heart chakra, and this is called the stage of judgment. We're coming down now. This is where the Buddha went up. There comes against you the Lord of Death as he came against the Buddha. And you are, what is it you're trying to decide between? The mind in its purity is in the state known as nothing to do, nothing to hold to. I love that. That's the state of repose. But there is blowing the wind of karma, the karmic wind that's going to pull you into action. And this wind has 8 characteristics. There are 8 winds. Gain and loss, praise and blame, eulogy and disparagement, joy and sorrow, polarities. If you are interested in those, if you let them touch you, you're pulled down. Then there comes a great wall behind you, a wall made up of ignorance, hate, and lust. Those are the powers of the first 3 chakras. And the Lord of Death then appears with his mirror through which your karmic character appears, and he sends his furies against you. And you see them cutting you up, eating your entrails, dragging you about, cutting off your head. And the text says, you must realize that these are simply projections of your own mind. Even if they come at you in fact, as they came at the Buddhist lamas in Tibet when the communists came in. The descriptions of what went on there are exactly descriptions of this stage of the underworld. And those monks, if they had the power, had to hold to the thought, these are projections of my own mind, and if they can hold to that thought, Buddhahood is achieved right there. If you can't, you're pulled into the world, and you hear armies saying, kill, slay, and great tumult of the passions of the world, which we know very well, particularly in these centuries. And then, what? We come down to the last chapters, the third and the second. And what appears now, this is very interesting, remembering Freud, there appear males and females in sexual intercourse, in the dreams, in the imagery. And if your next birth is going to be a male, you find yourself hating the father and loving the mother. And if you're going to be a female, you find yourself hating the mother and loving the father. And now is your last chance not to be born again. If you can keep from going between those two people, who can? You begin to feel the desire and a love for the place from which you are to be born, for the womb of your next birth. This brings you to chapter 2, and next thing you know, here you come, this squealing little ignorant thing, full of ignorance, desire, and passion. You're born again. Now to conclude, the basic idea in all of this is the lower is the same as the upper. Recognize it. Recognize it in equanimity. Know that this world, with all its passion, all its ignorance, all its horror, is the golden lotus world of those upper stages. When you look at those tankas, at the top are the peaceful Buddhas. At the bottom are these horrific ones. The horrific ones are simply lower inflections of the upper. Your passions are the lower inflections of the very saving energies of your life. Now you can exercise your passions. And this is what Western people call the non-moral aspect of all this. All of the activities of life are valid for salvation, you might say. It is through them, through going at them with your mind watching, you can release the beneficent aspect. And as long as you're alive, however, the beneficent will be hiding behind the horrific. The two must go together. Terror and joy are the same emotion. It's just a question of accent. Now when the Buddha had achieved illumination after the monster had left him, he sat engulfed in the innate light for 7 days, utterly speechless, immobilized. And then he got up and he stood back from that place and he looked for 7 days at the place where he had been seated. And then for 7 days he walked back and forth between those two places. And then he went and sat down under a tree and he said, "This cannot be taught." No sooner had the Buddha had that thought than the deities came down and said, "Teach for the good of mankind and the gods." So the Buddha said, "I will teach." But what he teaches is not Buddhism. What he teaches is the way to Buddhism, the way to this realization. What the word Buddha means is awake. The one who is awake. It's from a root bod that means to wake. Wake up. He's the one who has waked up to the inner light. We're all in sleep, so to say. And so Buddhism is called a way, a vehicle, a jhana. And there are two vehicles in Buddhism. There's the little vehicle and the big vehicle. The little vehicle is called the Hinayana, the little vehicle, the little ferry boat, and the big vehicle, the Mahayana. Now the word little vehicle means the ferry boat to the yonder shore on which only monks can ride. The basic idea of Hinayana is that you must leave the world, quit the world of normal life, get in the boat of monastic discipline, and go to work. Work for the yonder shore. Now, the most vivid description of Buddhist idea I ever heard was from my lamented friend Heinrich Zimmer, who actually described a ferry ride. And I'm going to do that to try to communicate, as he did to me, this mystery of the difference between the little vehicle and the big one, and this shore and that. We're on this shore. Well, in this particular place, we're in San Francisco. Oakland is said to be a good place to go. There used to be a place of learning over there. We want the wisdom. And I remember long, long ago, when there were no bridges, only those wonderful ferries, we could go in the ferry. So Buddhism is a ferry. We go down to the shore, and we want to go to Oakland. We've never been there. We've never known anyone who was there. It has just loomed there across the bay. And here comes the ferry boat with the ferryman, the Buddha. And the ferryman says, "Anybody for Oakland?" And you say, "I am." Well, he says, "Take thought. You can't come back here. You're going to quit this whole place and everybody in it and everything in it. It's a solitary voyage. You get aboard alone." And you think, oh, mother, things like that. And then you think, oh, so I'm going. I'm fed up with all this. It's all fake and all this kind of thing. I'm going. So you get aboard, and the boat starts to pull out, and you have a qualm for a moment. You'd like to stay, but it's too late now. The boat's out. You're a monk. Now ship ahoy. You're rowing, pulling up sails. You're a monk, doing all those things. And you don't say right and left anymore. You say starboard and port. The whole thing has changed around. You've got a vocabulary that's very refreshing. And you feel this is a new thing, and there's hope here anyhow. But my Lord, it takes a long time. Perhaps 2 or 3 incarnations. It didn't look so far. Finally, one incarnation or another, the boat scrapes ashore in Oakland. Now says the Buddha to his group, "O monks, suppose a man wishing to get to the yonder shore should make himself a raft, and having done so, actually reached the yonder shore. And now, out of respect for the raft and love for the raft, picked it up and carried it on his shoulders. Would that be an intelligent man?" "Oh no, blessed one," said the monks, "that would not." "So also with the rules of the order," said the Buddha. "They have nothing to do with nirvana." Now what about nirvana? We're over there. We are in the realm beyond the pairs of opposites. We have come to the luminous light. We have gone to what is called the yonder shore. Gone, gone, gone are all thoughts. But one thought comes to us. Let's look back and see what San Francisco looks like from here. Well, of course, there's no bay, there's no boat, there's no San Francisco. The whole thing was just the way something looked that wasn't anything. It's all gone. There's no Buddha, there's no Buddhism. This is the enigma of Buddhism. We are there. So why get in a ferry boat? This is known as the Mahayana, the big ferry boat. There's no place to go. There's nobody going. Because the first doctrine is all things are without a self. So who's going? What's up? And here we come to this curiously paradoxical vow of what is known as the Bodhisattva, the one who is in the world and released while here. His vow is, I refuse to accept nirvana for myself until I shall have brought all beings to nirvana. But when all beings will have been brought to nirvana, then no beings will have been brought to nirvana, because to imagine that there are beings to be brought to nirvana would disqualify one for bodhisattvahood. All form is emptiness. All emptiness is form. You don't have to meditate on nothing. Meditate on what's here. This is nothing. It has all come together. I want to conclude with just one little anecdote, which is my favorite Oriental anecdote of all. It is of a tiger, a female tiger, pregnant and very hungry. And she comes on a little herd of goats and pounces at them, and in doing so gives birth to her little one and herself dies. The goats scattered, and when they came back to their grazing, they find this little baby tiger just born and the dead mother. Well, they have very strong parental instincts, these goats, and they adopt the little tiger, who grows up imagining itself to be a goat. It learns to eat grass, which is not good for it. Its teeth don't work very well on it, its digestive juices neither. And so it grows to be a pretty miserable specimen of its kind. And when it reaches adolescence, a great big male tiger pounces on the herd, and the herd scatters. Well, this little thing, he's a tiger after all, he didn't know it. He's just standing there, he's not afraid. And the big fellow sees this ridiculous object, and he says, "What? You living here with goats?" The little thing bleats, like that, and nibbles a bit of grass. And the big fellow, mortified, smacks him around a little bit, and all he gets are these silly bleats. So he takes him by the nape of the neck and brings him to a pond where the water is perfectly still. And for the first time in its little long life, the little thing looks in, and what does he see? A little tiger. And the big fellow's face is there too. The guru, you are like me. He says, you better be like me. He says, you've got the face of a tiger, not a goat, you little thing. Well, it bleats again, and finally he grabs him by the neck and takes him to its den, where there are the remains, the bloody remains of a recently killed gazelle. And he says, here, have a chunk. The little thing backs away. I'm a vegetarian. So this chunk of meat is shoved down his throat, and he chokes on it. The text says, as all do on true doctrine. So he's guzzling this, and he had to swallow it, and it starts going through his veins and his nerves, his own proper food, without, spontaneously. He stretches like a tiger. And he opens his mouth, and out comes a rather elementary, but nevertheless genuine, tiger squeak. And the big fellow says, there we are. Now we go into the forest, and we eat tiger food. He stretches like a tiger. And he opens his mouth, and out comes a rather elementary, but nevertheless genuine, tiger squeak. And the big fellow says, there we are. Now we go into the forest, and we eat tiger food. And the point here is that we're all tigers living among these goats. With that, I leave you to the discovery of your tiger face.